Here. If you want to grab a seat, we're going to get started. Says I'm on. Good morning. Is that better? All right. If you want to grab a seat, we're going to get started. We're so glad to see everybody here this morning. They're telling me they can't hear me in the back. Good morning. Can you hear me? No, they can't hear me. Should I try and talk? Let me try and talk into this one. All right. Neither one? Oh, this one's not turned on. That one wasn't turned on.
I killed that, but your mic is on current.
All right. Good morning. Is that any better? Y'all hear me now? I still can't in the back. All right. Well, Hans will turn me up in a minute when he gets to the booth, but everybody will just have to be real quiet so they can hear me. I don't know if that's possible. Shh. I'll do what my wife does. Oh, look. Man, it's just like a kindergarten class. It's great. All right. We're so glad everybody's here this morning. If you are visiting, we apologize for the technical difficulties, but we'll make it up for you because we have a gift for you. If you're visiting, be sure to grab a coffee cup and a shirt before you leave today. We had a great time last night. For those of you that came out to Josh and Julia's house, let's give a hand for Josh and Julia for putting that together. And for everybody that decorated their trunk and handed out candy, it was really a whole lot of fun. It is always a fun thing to do the trunk or treat. We've got some more stuff coming up. We want you to know that small groups are still going on. If you haven't joined one and you want to jump into one, you can. Chosen will be here tonight at 6 o'clock. And if you don't know what that is a TV series about Jesus' life. It doesn't mean you have to be chosen to be here. So just come tonight at 6 and you can watch that. Also, the youth group is going to meet tonight from 5 to 7 at Ryan and Leslie's house. It's Sydney's birthday today. So say happy birthday to Sydney. She's the magical 18. Jared's not here this morning. He is feeling sick. He came home from the trunk or treat last night and started running a fever. So keep him in your prayers that he'll feel better. We will also have, this is actually wrong on here. The women's study will meet this week. The men's study will not. The men's study has been rescheduled, and we will get that. I think it's next Wednesday night we're rescheduled for. We have got something really special today. We have some resources that we've developed and come across to help for leading communion. So if you've ever led a communion devotional, or you ever would like to lead or think you would like to lead a communion devotional, or you have a younger child in your house and you want them to come and start learning how to lead in church, we're going to have a meal afterwards. We're going to get food for 40 people or so, and we're going to have that in the fellowship hall, and it will be about a 30 or 40-minute meeting. We'll just go over some really cool resources that are helpful in leading to communion thoughts. And so if you would like to, even if you weren't planning to before now, just stay for that. We would love to have you stay and be part of that. Being at that does not mean you are signing up a list to lead a communion devotional. But if you're just curious and you want to come and eat a sandwich and learn about it, you can come. That'd be great. Also, celebration. I've talked about this for several weeks in a row, but it is the 40th anniversary. And so on November 2nd, we're renting out Lovett Auditorium, and we're taking all the kids from Celebration to Lovett Auditorium at Murray State. That auditorium can seat about 1,500 people, and so we're inviting everybody who's ever been connected or curious about Celebration in every way. All the alumni, if you've sent kids, if you've just heard about it before. It's going to be a great worship event for the region. We're going to have Jeff Walling speaking there. We're going to have Regen Worship, which is Anthony Lancaster's singing group. We're going to have a comedian. We're going to have a lot of old friends that you might have known over the years if you were ever involved in anything. And so we really would like, I'm really asking sincerely, I would love for everybody at Reedland to come to that. It's going to be a fantastic night. It's going to be wonderful. If you say, I've never been to Celebration, I didn't grow up going to it, I don't even know what it is, come anyway. You'll have a great time, and it will be from 4 to 6:30 on Saturday, November 2nd. Also, next Saturday, October 26th, the Waldens are inviting anybody who wants to come by to have a meet and greet for Ryson and his new family. They were married in July, and they've got 2 daughters. They're going to kind of be hanging out in church to meet people who can't make it to the supper as well, but that's all in the bulletin. We have a great worship today. We're going to be talking about being salt and light, and we're going to ask God to illuminate in our hearts what that means as spoken in His Word. We're going to start by having Kason Riley come on up here, and Kason is going to do our reading for us. So, all right.
Good morning, everybody. I'm gonna be reading from Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 20. You're the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the lights of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappeared, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law, until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven.
All right, let's stand together and sing. Come worship Christ the King. Hallelujah, amen. Praises to Him we bring. Hallelujah, amen. With grateful heart and voice, before His throne rejoice. Praises His gracious choice. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah. Come worship Christ the King. Hallelujah. Come worship Christ the King. Come lift your hearts on high. Hallelujah. Amen. Let praises fill the sky. Hallelujah. Amen. He is our guide and friend. Our lives on Him depend. His love will never King. Hallelujah. Come worship Christ the King. Praises to Christ belong. Hallelujah. Amen. Life shall not end the song. Hallelujah. Amen. On heaven's joyful shore, His glory will adore, singing forevermore. Hallelujah. Amen. Hallelujah. Come worship Christ the King. Hallelujah. Come worship Christ the King. Hallelujah. Come worship Christ the King. Hallelujah. Come worship Christ the King.
Let's pray. God, may you enter our doors today. May our worship be about you today, and may you be exalted. I pray a protection from Satan's lies. In the name of Jesus, you are not welcome here. Protect us, Lord, from his distraction. Jesus, you are my hope, and you are our hope. Help us to never cease praising you, and give us unbroken praise. For it is you, all because of you, Lord, that we are alive. Holy Spirit, fill our lungs with breath that lifts you up as we sing. Giver of every breath I breathe,
Author of all eternity, giver of every breath and thing,
you be the glory. And maker of heaven and of earth,
no one can comprehend your worth.
King
King
over
over
all the universe, to you be the glory. And I'm alive because I'm alive in you. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. It's all because the blood of Jesus Christ that covers me and breaks this dead man's life. It's all because of Jesus I'm alive. Giver of every breath I breathe, author of all eternity, giver of every perfect thing, to you be the glory. Maker of heaven and of earth, no one can comprehend your worth. King over all the universe, to you be the glory. And I'm alive because I'm alive in you. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. Because of Jesus. It's all because the blood of Jesus Christ. Because of Jesus. That covers me and raises dead men's life. It's all because of Jesus. Every sunset sings your grace. The universe cries out your praise. I'm singing freedom all my days. Now that I'm alive. And it's all because of Jesus I'm alive. Because of Jesus. It's all because of the blood of Jesus Christ. That covers me and raises dead men's life. It's all because of Jesus I'm alive. on Zion's glorious
Summit stood.
On On Zion's
glorious summit stood, numerous hosts redeemed by blood. They hailed their King in strength divine. I heard the song and strove to join. I heard the song and strove to join.
Hear
All who suffered sword or flame for truth or Jesus' lovely name shall victory now and hail the Lamb and bow before the great I am and bow before the great I am.
while
Everlasting ages roll, eternal love shall feast her soul, and scenes of bliss forever new rise in succession to their view. Rise in succession to their view. Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of hosts on high adore. Who like me thy praise should sing, O Almighty King. Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of hosts on high adore. Holy, holy, holy.
I'm a sucker for good maps. So I remember, if you remember those days before GPS, and you had to get out a piece of paper that had a bunch of squiggly lines and numbers on there. My kids really don't know what that is, right? I remember in my 20s, I worked for Sherwin-Williams as a delivery guy, the one on Broadway. So we had this huge map, and I had to go figure out where all my delivery routes were. And then I joined the Navy, and then I was introduced to charts, completely different map for the water. And there were times that when we were out on deployment, even though that I drove the sub, I wasn't allowed to look over my right shoulder to look at the computer screen to find out where we were, because that's a map, and I wasn't supposed to know where we were, even though I was putting us there. And then when Leslie and I moved to Dallas-Fort Worth, they had huge maps in books that were like this thick. I had one for Dallas and one for Fort Worth, and you had to flip through the pages, try to figure out where you're going, and go, okay, and you have to remember it. And I'm sure some of you use the maps from AAA. You go, okay, I'm gonna go to Destin, and they're gonna give you those flip, you remember those? Triptychs, yeah. Yeah, those were fantastic. And then GPS came along, and then you're pushing the buttons trying to figure out where am I gonna go. So maps have changed. Like even a couple weeks ago, I love a good paper map, but a couple of weeks ago, my brothers and I were in Iceland. So thank goodness for Google Maps, because once you get away from Reykjavik and you're out in the countryside, you could be driving circles for days around the mountains. So maps are pretty important in our lives, whether paper or GPS. And I'm thankful for this series, the Map of the Kingdom, because we think about the kingdom. We think about how do we get there in our daily lives. And one of the words that Jesus has brought up that keeps coming up in my life periodically is love. Love is one of those trails that we sometimes have difficulty with because there's people involved. People are difficult. They're hard to love. Maybe you have a coworker or a family member, or maybe just the individual that cuts you off in traffic. You know, it's just one of those things. Love, 4 letters, but so important as part of the map to the kingdom. So let's pray. Lord, as we take communion and we talk about the map to your kingdom, you had a huge sacrifice. You taught us to love. You taught us to love, and you were the greatest example because you even had someone at your table that was hard to love, that was about to betray you. So your sacrifice, the blood, your body, as we celebrate today that Christians all around the world are celebrating your love and your sacrifice, please continue to let us remember to love those around us. Let us forgive those around us. And please forgive us. We mess up every day, but because of your sacrifice, all is forgiven. In Jesus' name, amen.
I cry out for your hand of mercy to heal me. I am weak, and I need your love to free me. Oh Lord, my rock, my strength in weakness, come rescue me, oh Lord. You are my hope, your promise never fails me, and my desire is to follow you forever, for you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me, for you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me. Oh Lord, you have been good, you have been faithful for all generations. Oh Lord, your steadfast love and tender mercy have been our salvation. For by your hand, we have been fed, and by your Spirit, we have been led.
All right, we're going to dismiss all of our 2-year-olds up to kindergartners for Kid Power. It's Kid Power time. Just head to this door right here to go out to Kid Power. Abby, since I already did the announcements, you can skip forward 2 slides. All right, kids, we're going to have fun in Kid Power. I wish I could go to Kid Power. Man. Something very important happened on Thursday, November 20th, 1980. My wife was born. But something else happened that day too, and I want to tell you about it. On Thursday, November 20th, 1980, a guy named Leonce Viatar Jr. and his nephew put their small fishing boat into a little lake called Lake Peniere, which is, I think it's pronounced Peniere. It's in southern Louisiana, right near the coast, just a few miles from the coast of the Gulf. And it's about 2.5 miles west of New Orleans. And they really knew this lake was famous for catfish. It was about 11 feet deep. It wasn't very deep. And they were excited about a day of catching some catfish so they could fry up and have a good catfish supper that night. About mid-morning, though, they noticed something was wrong. Their boat began to move in a strong current. Well, they'd fished this lake many times before. There were no currents in this lake. And so they were kind of concerned that suddenly they were being pulled towards this large oil drilling rig, 150-foot tall oil drilling rig that had recently been erected in the center of the lake. Leonce and his nephew jumped into action. They started the motor, they turned the boat out of the current, but it was no use. The current was just too strong. They weren't gaining ground, and eventually they began losing ground as the current became stronger and stronger. Suddenly, to their horror, they realized that all 11 of the barges that were moored in various places around the drilling platform had broken loose and were spinning around the drilling platform. And the drilling platform itself was starting to lean to one side. Nearby, there was another guy. This man, I'm going to show you on the screen. His name is Oris Lee Menard. He was just a young man at the time. And he stood on the deck of a tugboat, furiously trying to cut the lines that were attaching his tugboat to one of these barges, while the other deckhands were helping the 8-man crew of the drilling platform get off and onto the boat. Once the 8 men were on the boat, the lines were cut free. They turned the tug away from the drilling platform, put it at full throttle, and didn't go anywhere. They were standing still in the water, being pulled against the current, and they're full throttle, running the engine as hard as they can, thinking, what on earth is going to happen? Suddenly, out of nowhere, the whirlpool that had formed burped out some air from below, which temporarily interrupted the current, and they shot off towards the shore. Leonce and his nephew weren't so lucky. They weren't going anywhere. They were stuck in the current. They weren't having any luck. They had a little tiny motor, and it wasn't doing any good. And not only that, now one of those huge barges was coming straight towards them at tremendous speed. This giant barge was going to smash their little fishing boat into pieces. But luckily, the barge missed them by just feet, passing between them and the whirlpool. And when it did, it broke the current just long enough that they were able to get about 250 yards away towards the shore. They got to the shore, they jumped out of the boat, they tied their boat to a tree and ran for higher ground. When they got to the top of a hill, they turned around just in time to see the tree they had tied their boat to collapse into the water and be sucked into the whirlpool. The entire shore of the lake was beginning to collapse, and mudslides were forming as the water disappeared, and the mud was careening down to where the drilling platform used to be, but wasn't there any longer. Suddenly, all the barges and the drilling platform had been sucked into a hole in the ground, and there was no lake left. In fact, 65 acres of land around the edge of the lake had collapsed and disappeared into the lake. About 1,500 feet below, there were 50 miners hard at work when the evacuation alarms went off. They scrambled up to the 3rd level only to be blocked by deep water. So they scrambled back down a level where a supervisor named Randy LaSalle was racing around the mine in a pickup truck, grabbing workers from remote areas. He showed them a different exit where they were able to get to an elevator which could only take up 8 men at a time. How do you decide which 8 go first? The 50 men waited as 8 men at a time went up the slow elevator. Somehow, not a single man in the mine or on the oil rig lost their life that day. What happened at Lake Piñar in Louisiana? Well, the lake sat above a massive salt mine, one of 5 massive salt domes there in southern Louisiana. It had been extensively mined over the years, and salt mines often sit near large oil deposits. So the Texaco Oil Company had decided that they were going to drill for oil in the middle of the lake, but they did their math wrong. And they put their drill right down into the top of the salt mine, piercing it with a 14-inch hole. The weight of the water rushing down through the hole quickly expanded that hole until all of the lake water ended up in the mine. The lake was connected to the Gulf of Mexico by a canal that emptied from the lake into the Gulf. The fresh water from the lake emptied into the salt water of the Gulf. When this vacuum was created, it was so powerful that it reversed the flow of the canal. And for the next couple of days, salt water from the Gulf poured into the lake, filling it back up. For those days while that was happening, where the canal entered the lake, so much ground had collapsed that it created a 150-foot deep or tall waterfall, the tallest waterfall in the state of Louisiana during the time that it was going. This is actually a photo of the waterfall, 150 feet, as the salt water filled the lake back up. Now the lake is about 65 acres larger, and it's a brackish saltwater lake. I'm telling you this because salt mines are really dangerous places. If you do any research on it at all, throughout history, salt mines have been terribly dangerous. There have been so many mining disasters associated with salt mines because for most of human history, salt has been very dangerous to mine and gather. Over 2,000 years ago in the Sichuan province of China, they were shaft mining, where you dig a shaft down like you think of to mine something. And these workers would go down, and occasionally, every once in a while, the workers would come out and they would complain that they felt funny, they'd stumble around, they'd be weak, and often they would die. Sometimes when they would be mining, all of a sudden there would be massive explosions, fireballs that would come out of the shaft and then disappear. And so the local people said there was a demon in the shaft, but they needed the salt, so they kept mining. Over the course of 300 years, someone discovered that these pockets that they were running into were not demons, it was natural gas. And through some very ingenious use of bamboo, they were able to pipe the natural gas out of the mine to the surface where they used it to power the boilers, which would allow them to boil the water off and get the salt. It was actually the first natural gas powered device in human history. In Iran, Poland, and France, they have ancient salt mines that have collapsed that are being remined. And in modern times, we have been digging in these mines and we have found mummified remains of ancient salt workers because when the salt mines collapsed, their bodies were completely preserved. Hair, clothes, everything by the salt. But perhaps worst of all these atrocities I'm talking about, perhaps worst of all is we know from the movie Pinocchio that if you're a naughty boy, then you turn into a donkey and they sell you to work in the salt mines. I mean, that's got to be the worst of all. So don't be a naughty boy. All right. Why am I telling you this? Because I'm trying to make the point that we take salt for granted. I mean, it's on every table. Your pantry is full of it. You go to the grocery store, there's plenty of it. If you go in the annex right now, there are cabinets. You can open one up, and there are probably 30 salt shakers just full of salt sitting there. I mean, we have an abundance of salt. We don't even think about salt. The only time we think about salt is when we're making homemade ice cream, and you go to the store and somebody else bought all the rock salt, right? And we don't ever really even think about salt. Or if it's going to be a snowstorm or an ice storm, and you go to Lowe's, and they've already sold out of rock salt, and you can't get any. We really don't even think about salt. We think that it is just so abundant. And it truly is abundant. But for most of human history, the mining of it was so dangerous that salt was actually a very precious commodity. It was really more of a luxury item, one which was harvested with great difficulty. You might know this, when Gandhi was leading the attempt to free India from imperial British control in the 1930s, the key issue was salt. The Indian people had for years gone to the seashore and gathered their own salt from tidal pools or from mud, and they would boil it off. And the British took control of all the salt production and then sold it back to the Indian people with a hefty tax on top. So Gandhi got a group of people and he led a march for 240 miles to the salt production facilities on the coast where the people gathered salt from the mud and from the tidal pools. Over the next few months, the British Empire sent in troops and police, and over 60,000 people were arrested, including Gandhi. 2,500 people were beaten by police, all for just gathering up salt from the seashore. Why all this fuss over salt? Well, salt is incredibly important. In fact, it is necessary for life. Without salt, your body can't manage fluid right, which means you'll become dehydrated. Severe lack of salt, I believe is that it's pronounced hyponatremia. That can lead to neurological problems, seizures, and even death. But in addition, salt also sanitizes. How many of you heard the phrase, oh, that's like putting salt in your wound? Well, we say that because if you insult somebody who's already hurt, it stings. Well, putting salt in a wound where you're already hurt stings. But for a long time, before the advent of modern antiseptics, salt was used to sanitize wounds. It preserves. We would not be here today. People could not have crossed the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean to settle new nations, new continents, without salt. Because what did the sailors eat? Hardtack and salted pork. Food could be preserved for months at a time with salt. And also, salt flavors things. I mean, is there anybody here who likes their French fries unsalted? Because, I mean, that's just weird. It's just weird. Yeah. You got to put salt on your French fries, right? How many of you you like salt so much that you'll sit down sometimes with your plate and you just put salt on it before you even taste it? And you know you shouldn't. But we like salt. In fact, we like salt so much that for many of us, the doctor has to say, hey, you need to reduce the amount of salt in your diet because we've come so accustomed to the taste of salted foods. But in the ancient world, it was very precious. And even though people's lives depended on it, they didn't have the abundance of salt that we have. And people's lives were often given to harvest it. So now we get to the words of Jesus talking about salt. Matthew 5:13, he says this, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." And if we just stopped right there, I mean, that could be the sermon, right? We could apply that all day long. Boy, salt is a sanitizer. You're the salt of the earth. You're going out and you're making things holy. You're sanitizing things. Salt is a preservative. So we preserve God's work in this world. We stave off death and decay. We flavor the world. We make it richer, better, bolder. We're a precious thing, needed by all, rare and hard to come by. Also, Jesus is speaking to the poor and the downtrodden, the oppressed and the depressed and the diseased. And he's saying, you are the salt of the earth. The Pharisees and the sages tell you you're not. You're the salt of the earth. But for those, the Pharisees and the sages and the Sadducees, who say that they're the salt of the earth, they've lost their saltiness. Well, that can't actually happen. It's rhetorical. But he says, if salt is not salty, what's it good for? It's good for nothing. And so we could just stop right here and we could say, what a great lesson Jesus has given us. Because all of these thoughts that we've just expressed would have been true thoughts to the original hearer. They would have heard it this way. They would have understood each of these things. But as Jesus is revealing this map of the kingdom of God through the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying there's this invisible kingdom, but you can see it. And I'm providing you the map right now of this kingdom. As Jesus is doing this, he's connecting this invisible kingdom to something real, tangible, and known. You know, people knew what salt was. Well, you're the salt of the earth. Well, I know what that is. I can make that connection. And so as Jesus often did, he took the things of God that are hard for us to understand, that are spiritual and invisible, and he explained them through common, everyday, ordinary means. But there's another context here that I think we often miss. Under the old covenant, God told the people that when they offered a grain offering, they're to season it with salt. This is in Leviticus 2:3. Season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God, out of your grain offering, add salt to your offerings. Well, it's not a surprise that they would have to add salt. Again, salt is a precious commodity. It's actually quite expensive. God wants the offerings to be a sacrifice. So when they offer this grain offering, they should add salt. That makes sense. It's a sacrifice they're going to make. But this language, the salt of the covenant, is kind of interesting. And it's repeated in other places. We see in Numbers 18:19 that when Aaron and the other priests are going to get a portion of the offering, you might not know this, but when people offered sacrifices before the Lord, a portion of the meat was given to the priests. It was cooked on the altar, it was given to the priests, and that's how the priests were fed. The Levites, God said, I will be your portion. The land's divided up among the other people. You don't get the land, you get me. The land will produce food for them. They will offer the food to me, and a portion of that will go to you. And so the Levites actually lived on a portion of the offering. And so in this passage, it says, whatever is set aside from the holy offerings the Israelites present to the Lord, I give to you and to your sons and daughters as your perpetual share. It is an everlasting covenant of salt before the Lord for both you and your offerings. There's that covenant of salt language again. These offerings are salted. The Jews took this over time to mean that all offerings, not just grain offerings, should be salted. And that the salt was a sign of the covenant. God also uses this language later when he's talking about David's throne, that David's throne will be established with the salt of the covenant. And so in God's economy, in God's eyes, when people sacrificed before the Lord, that sacrifice was given and the people participated in that sacrifice by offering salt, by making an additional offering of something that's precious, that's rare, that's needed, and it's life-giving. And the people added the salt to the offering, and that became a seal or a sign of God's covenant. And so in the new covenant, who will be the sacrifice? Jesus. Jesus will be the sacrifice. Jesus' body will be put upon the altar. Jesus will be given. His blood will be shed. And if Jesus says you're the salt of the earth, there could be the idea there that Jesus is implying that his sacrifice you will be able to participate in by adding yourself to the sacrifice as the salt of the covenant. Joining him on the altar, participating in his sacrifice. You think of the language we use around communion. Jesus says, this is my blood. This is my body. You are participating in my sacrifice. In Romans, we're called to be living sacrifice. So we have the language all through Scripture that we are now participating in the sacrifices before God. And in this passage, there's an idea communicated here that the first reader might have understood, the first century reader or listener, hearer, might have understood to be as, if I'm the salt of the earth, then I'm being called to offer that as part of this covenant, as part of this sacrifice. In this invisible kingdom, that means that you and I now have the opportunity to join Jesus on the altar in covenant with God as participants. Not a faraway covenant being sealed by holy men in a walled city that you have to travel to, sprinkling salt as an altar, but carrying the death of Jesus in our bodies and contributing as the salt of the earth to that offering and taking that sacrifice wherever we go into the entire world. And then Jesus goes on. Matthew 5:14. You're the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And this one might be a little easier. I mean, we all are familiar with the idea that a light shines in a dark. Probably everybody here has seen the illustration where if we turned off all the lights in this room and we let all of our eyes adjust, I could light a single candle, and before long we would be able to see out through the entire room that just a little bit of light pushes back the darkness. We understand what Jesus is saying when he says we're the light of the world. We are shining bright, pushing back the darkness. The city on a hill is kind of interesting. The word here for the hill is Tel. And if you ever look into any sites in Israel, you pull it up on Google and you just look archaeology in Israel, you will see Tel before the name of almost every single archaeological site. Tel Beth Shemesh, Tel Shiloh, Tel this, Tel that. Because a Tel is a specific kind of hill. A Tel is a hill that's made up of layers of old city. Cities were placed in the ancient world where there were resources. And so maybe there was a spring. There was good farmland. It was a very strong vantage point from which to be protected from enemies. Or maybe it was all of the above. And so when a city would get destroyed by its enemies, the people would say, well, this is a great location. It's prime real estate. We want to rebuild right here. We don't want to move somewhere else. But they didn't have heavy equipment. So if you have all these big stone walls and stone buildings and it gets toppled over and burnt by your enemies, what are you going to do to rebuild? You're going to bring in fill dirt and level it off and build from there. And this would happen over and over and over again over the centuries. That's why when archaeologists are digging in the ancient world, they go, oh yeah, there's all these layers under our feet from different centuries. I always didn't understand that. And I always thought, is there enough dirt blowing around that it just keeps building up higher and higher? No, it's because when the city would be destroyed, the people would bring in fill dirt, level it off, and start again. They didn't have the kind of heavy equipment required to clear it off. And they wanted their city to be in the same place. An additional advantage is every time they did this, the city got a little higher, which made it a little bit easier to defend. Now, Jesus says you're a city on a Tel. You're a city that's been built up over the centuries to be up high. There were cities that were not destroyed. They had no strategic military value. They didn't tick anybody off, and they just continued to exist. So it was very possible there could be a city on a plain. Now I want you to imagine for a minute, you're traveling back in the day where you didn't even have GPS and you didn't even have maps. You're just navigating by the stars or landmarks. And it is a dangerous thing to do. And it's especially dangerous at night because there are large nocturnal predators in Palestine that exist, lions and other big cats and other bears and other kinds of animals that live in that region, many of whom are nocturnal. And then there are robbers and, marauding gangs of thugs. I don't know. There's people who are out to get you, and you're traveling, you're very exposed. So you're traveling at night and you're worried about robbers and gangs of thugs and lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And it's a cloudy night and you can't even see the stars. And maybe you've not traveled this way before. So somebody just told you, well, you're going to go to the big oak tree and you're going to turn right. Well, maybe the oak tree got knocked down in a storm. It would be very scary to be traveling, trying to find this city. Now, if you imagine if there's a city on a plain, you could see that city at night. People would have some fires going. There'd be some lights. You could see it from a few miles off. But if it's on a hill, if it's on a Tel, you'll be able to see it from a lot further. I just want you to imagine for a moment, you're traveling, you're nervous, you're worried, you're wondering, am I going in the right direction? Am I going to get there? I really don't want to be out here all night. And you come to the rise on a hill and you look off in the distance and you see this bright, glowing city. We have a picture of what this might look like here. I want you to imagine this city off in the distance, and you think, oh, thank goodness. I'm almost there. I'm not lost. I'm going to make it. That city would represent hope and safety and security and rest and all the things that you need and you want. And so for these people, this is a very important image, that you are a city, not just a city, but you're a city on a hill, bright and shining. We talked a few weeks ago about how during the Feast of Tabernacles, they would light these massive lamps up on top of telephone poles, on top of the hill, on top of the temple in Jerusalem that could be seen all the way from the Mediterranean coast. And people would say Jerusalem is the light of the world. Jesus is tying into all that language. He's saying that's you. You are a beacon of hope. You're communicating to people that this is safety, this is security, this is rest, this is hope, this is peace, this is everything you need. And they can see you from a long way off. And you're shining out in the world and you're pushing back the darkness. You're the light of the world. So you and I, that's what we represent in this world. Jesus is looking at a group of people who are oppressed, sick, injured. They maybe haven't practiced the Jewish religion very well, or they may not be Jewish at all. And they've been looked down on by the religious establishment and told they're good for nothing. God probably would never bother to have any mercy on them. They might as well just go home and farm their land and hope that they have a decent life because they're not pleasing to God. They're a stench in his nostrils. And Jesus starts out with the Beatitudes by saying, you are the ones who are blessed. And now he says, not only you are the ones who are blessed, you're the salt of the earth. You get to participate in the covenant. You get to carry that with you. You get to go be a preservation agent and a flavor and a sanitizer in the world. You're the light of the world. You're shining your light. You're going out pushing back the darkness. That is who you are. Jesus is speaking new identity into the people. He's giving them a new identity. And that's what he's saying to us. That's who we are. I mentioned last week one of my favorite movies is National Treasure. Now, I didn't say this last week. I realize it's not great cinema. And I realize it's horrible history. I mean, it's absolutely terrible history. It's not a historical movie at all. But it's fun, man. It's just a eat some popcorn and candy, kind of fun, clean family movie. And I really enjoy this movie. And after I shared the illustration from it last week, there was one more scene in it that kept coming to my mind as I was thinking about this week's lesson. Near the end of the movie, Nick Cage and the gang are trapped by the bad guy several hundred feet below New York City in what appears to be a treasure vault that's already been looted. And they're also disappointed because they're like, oh, the treasure's gone. Somebody else got here first. And so the bad guy leaves them down there. He goes back to the surface, and they're stuck without a treasure and without a way out. But Nick Cage says, no. I was lying to the bad guy. This isn't the treasure room. This is a fake treasure room. He saw some clue. He does a few things. They push open a wall, and there's a door to the real treasure room. And they walk through, and they've got one torch. Nick Cage has got one torch, and they walk in. And as far as that torch will throw light, 10, 20 feet, there's just gold. And Riley, one of the friends, he hugs this big green pharaoh thing and kisses a big green man, and they're picking up gold, and there's crowns, and they're so excited. Look at all of this treasure. This is incredible. We found the treasure. But what they didn't find is the way out. And so they got to find the way out. They said, well, the first thing they would have done is they would have dug a shaft back to the surface so we could get out. So there's got to be a shaft here somewhere. And Nick Cage looks down, and in front of him, there's a trough filled with lamp oil. And he goes, oh, okay, great. And so he sticks his torch into the trough so that it will light up the room. Well, the trough lights, and it goes down away from them, and down some stairs, and down hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet across this giant cavernous space, which is completely filled with treasure. And so as they walked into the treasure room, they were overjoyed that they were in a 20 by 20 room filled with treasure. And they thought, this is more treasure than we could ever imagine in our entire lives. It's so amazing. But then as the light pushed back the darkness, what did they see? That the treasure was 100, 200, 1,000 times bigger and better than they ever could have even imagined. And this scene stuck with me because do you see what I'm getting at here? We're the light of the world. And when we're carrying that light out there into the world, and we're the salt of the earth, and when we do our job well, and we're loving our neighbor, and we're caring about people, and we're filled with joy, and they look and they go, man, it really is a treasure. Look at the smile on Margaret's face. I mean, look at Devin. Look at the way they're living their lives. It's a treasure. And they're seeing a 20 by 20 room. They're seeing as far as that torch can go. But the treasure of the kingdom of God is 100, 200, 1,000 times bigger than we can ever even imagine. So as we go forth living our lives for Jesus, we are illuminating this unbelievable, incredibly amazing treasure that is the kingdom of God. Let's stand and let's sing together.
If that's who we really are, then we have our praise today that we've given. And it's really easy sometimes to step out of those doors and not continue that praise. And that's what unbroken praise means. We're not going to stop that praise when we step out that door. Let our deeds not outrun our words, and let our life outweigh our song. So let's continue what we have done today out there for the world and be that light. Praise unbroken, praise unending, be yours forevermore. Praise untainted, praise unfading, be yours forevermore. Be yours forevermore. Unbroken praise be yours, God, forever. All my praise be yours, God, forever. Lord, take this life, let it become your throne. Unbroken praise be yours. My surrender, my devotion, be yours forevermore. Be yours forevermore. Unbroken praise be yours, God, forever. All my praise be yours, God, forever. Lord, take this life, let it become your throne. Unbroken praise be yours. So let my deeds outrun my words, and let my life outweigh my songs. So let my deeds outrun my words, and let my life outweigh my songs. So let my deeds outrun my words, and let my life outweigh my song. So let my deeds outrun my words, and let my life outweigh my song. Unbroken praise be yours, God, forever. All my praise be yours, God, forever. Lord, take this life, let it become your throne. Unbroken praise be yours. Unbroken praise be yours, God, forever. All my praise be yours, God, forever. Lord, take this life, let it become your throne. Unbroken praise be yours. Unbroken praise be yours. Amen.
One quick thing of note that I wanted to share with you is Sydney Kate Hughes' 18th birthday today.
Morning, church. So this week, good morning, Aaron. This week when I've been thinking about the prayer for the lost, it's like two verses have kept going through my mind that I'm going to share. I'm going to give you something to chew on this week. That means think about, Josh. Okay. So Luke 9:23, Jesus tells them, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. And That's tough. That's tough, especially when you get to the daily word of that. It's not just on Sunday or whatever day we meet with our small groups. It's daily. And then I also started thinking about Matthew 22:37. And it says, when he was given the greatest commandment, when they asked him, what is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And if he stopped right there, it would have been fine and amazing. But then he also added, and the second is like it. It's love your neighbor as yourself. That's what I think of when I think of the prayer for the lost, is you've got to take up your cross daily. And then also you got to love your neighbor as if you love yourself. So let's pray. Father God, we thank you and we praise you and we love you for being able to gather today and just worship and learn and just be together, one body, one like mind, with one goal, and that is to praise you. Be with us this week as we try to take up our cross daily to follow you, and we try to give up whatever separates us from you. And be with us as we try to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, because as we all know, sometimes it's hard to love ourselves. It's hard to love other people. Please be with us. Please guide us. Please direct us as we see people the way that you see them, not the way that I see them. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.